Hello everybody. In the current affairs this week, that is the week ended 28th of April 2024. First of all, the Indian stock markets. The Indian stock markets were in a buoyant mood. The Nifty 50 was up by more than 1%. Nifty mid cap was up by more than 3.5%. And the Nifty small cap was up by more than 4%. The FIIs were sellers to the extent of more than 14,000 crores, but the DIIs were buyers to the extent of more than 20,000 crores. This clearly shows that FIIs are still reluctant to put their bets on India, and they are maybe waiting for the outcome of the general elections. But as far as the DIIs and the Indian investors are concerned, they really know what is going to happen as an outcome of these elections and what is going to happen thereafter. They are very confident about their own country, which is a good sign. The sectors which were up this week were Nifty PSU Bank was up by more than 6%. Nifty Realty was up by more than 4.5%. Nifty Metals was up by more than 3.5%. But the laggard was Nifty IT, which was up just by less than 1%. As far as the commodity markets are concerned, Brent crude was marginally up by more than just 2%. Gold was down by around 2.5%. And silver corrected, it was down by more than 5.5%. As far as the US markets are concerned, the 10-year G-Sec yield in the US was up by at least 4 basis points to 4.66%, and the Nasdaq was up by more than 4%, and the S&P 500 was up by more than 2.5%. What I wanted to talk about at a little length this week was about the controversy and everything which was in the news in respect of the inheritance tax. It all started with the comment of Chairman of Indian Overseas Congress, Mr. Sam Pitroda, where he said that inheritance tax is an interesting thing to look at, and he said that in the US, if somebody dies, then 55% of his estate will go to the state and 45% will go to his or her inheritors. And this, as I said, and I repeat, that he said that this is an interesting tax and one can look at it. Now this created a lot of controversy. BJP, in all very strong election mood, immediately said that these are dangerous intentions. So, of what we can infer is, BJP as of now is definitely not in favor of these kinds of taxation on death of somebody. Now, let us first understand as to what is inheritance tax and what is estate duty. So when somebody dies, the estate of the deceased, if it is taxed, that is estate duty. And the amounts which are received by the inheritors, when they are taxed, that is an inheritance tax. Now, when it comes to the levy of these taxes, if we go into a little detail as to how these taxes are levied, especially in the countries like US. In US, there is an estate duty, that is, the estate of the deceased is taxed under the federal law. In US, there is federal tax and the state tax. So, estate duty is a federal tax which ranges from 18% to 40% depending upon the estate which is left by the deceased. And there are 6 states in the US which over and above estate duty, they levy even the inheritance tax. So the estate of the deceased is taxed, and when the inheritors receive the part of this estate, even they are taxed as an inheritance tax. So this is what is as far as estate duty and inheritance tax. Several developed economies like US, as I said, UK, Japan, South Korea, France, they levy estate duty or inheritance tax or a death tax which ranges around 40 to 50%. China, which is an economy which is compared with India, does not levy any inheritance tax. Now let us look at what was as far as the tax on death in India. India had a estate duty, that is, the estate of the deceased was taxed, but in 1985 estate duty was abolished in India. But at the time when this tax was in force, the highest rate of estate duty was as high as 85%. And anybody who is leaving behind an estate of more than 1 lakh of rupees was liable to pay estate duty, and the basis was the market value of this estate. And the moment it crossed 20 lakhs, it was taxed at the highest rate of, as I said, 85%. Now, this can lead to so many complications. If somebody is owning a company and shares in a company, and if, say, for instance, the value of the holding of that promoter is, say, 10,000 crores, and if there is the levy of estate duty to the extent of even 40 to 50%, where will the inheritors bring those 4,000 or 5,000 crores? So naturally, they will have to sell shares or lose control over their own company. And the same would happen in case of real estate. If somebody leaves behind a real estate which is huge, large, say 400, 500 crores, and if that the inheritor is supposed to pay tax on it, he might not have that enough amount of money. This led to a lot of litigation, and the reason for abolishing estate duty in India, as it was said at that point of time, was that the cost of collection and the litigation which it led to was far more than the amount of estate duty which was actually collected. Then the finance ministers of last 10, 12 years, or maybe 15 years to be precise, Mr. Chidambaram and Mr. Pranab Mukherjee of the UPA had talked about the estate duty or the inheritance tax and had given an indication that this is a law worth looking at. Thereafter, when BJP came to power, the then Minister of State for Finance, Mr. Jayant Sinha, also showed some favor in the levy of estate duty or inheritance tax. Now, if estate duty is to be levied, then naturally there has to be a levy of gift tax, because then both the things have to coexist. Otherwise, the purpose of estate duty would get defeated. In India, gift tax has been abolished in 1998, and today there are some provisions in the Income Tax Act which take care of taxation on gifts. But as such, the gift tax in India has been abolished. Now, what can be the fallout of this kind of tax? The first and foremost is that India as an economy, and especially at this point of time, is much different than what the US and UK is. So thinking about estate duty at this point of time might not be a great idea. India has always seen that if the rates of taxes are higher, then the tax collection suffers. If there are moderate rates of tax, people become more compliant, and the tax to GDP ratio definitely improves. And that is what is the trend as of now, and this should not be disturbed. One of the reasons which was is always rather put forward by somebody who would be advocating the levy of inheritance tax or estate duty would be that this would lead to better income and wealth distribution. But as far as India is concerned, and the noted constitutionalist and economist whose views were very well respected in those days, Mr. Nani Palkhiwala, in respect of estate duty, always said that in India, first we need to create wealth, and then we need to have wealth tax and estate duty. So the process of creating wealth in India has blossomed in the recent years. Let it reach a stage of maturity, India becoming a developed economy, and then at that point of time, all these things might be thought of. Then somebody says that these amounts can be used for public spending, but then it really leads to a regressive kind of an effect on somebody who puts in hard effort and labor in creating wealth, which is ultimately going to be distributed to the public at large. Then another interesting argument which is put forward on levy of estate duty is that if all the wealth is passed over to the next generation, the next generation might be wasters of wealth, and that would not be good for the public at large. They would rather splurge wealth, and this will create a bad kind of a system in the economy which is not desirable. So the way the things are, India is not something where estate duties should be thought of. In any case, the flows of income, which is income, is taxed under the income tax law. Now, if even wealth is taxed, then the accumulation of these flows and the appreciation on that would also will get taxed. This will lead to a lot of energy being wasted in planning for evasion or some kind of a planning for saving on this estate duty and inheritance tax. We come across through so many of non-resident Indians who are our clients who would always think of estate duty, and they are busy planning their affairs by creating some private trust, moving their wealth into different jurisdictions, and this can act as a regressive kind of a measure at the time when India is at the cusp of development and going to the next level of growth. And the most satisfying thing which has happened on account of this controversy, as I would rate, is that now if the BJP, as we all know, for everything which we understand of today, is set to come to power for the next 5 years, and if they say that these are dangerous intentions, we are quite reassured that in some time to come, at least for the coming 5 years, we might not see the discussion or emergence of discussion or any levy of estate duty or inheritance tax. So we are rather, by creating this controversy at this point of election time, we are putting to rest the levy of estate duty at least for some time in India. Thank you. That is all for this week.